What a privilege it is to be here. I'm incredibly honored. And Blake, thank you for the invitation. And Blake and I go back a long way. Actually, I worked at First Baptist Paducah, Kentucky, right out of college. I had a little gap year. I went to community college and worked at First Baptist Paducah in the recreation center. His mom and dad, his granddad was the executive pastor. His mom and dad actually attended that church. And his mom would come over to the COC, we called it, the Christian Outreach Center, to go to a Bible study. And she'd say, "Here, watch Blake," right when he was a baby. And so I had the privilege of rocking his bassinet the first year of it. I watched him. I never changed him, for the record, all right? I just never did. But I'm so thankful to be here. The topic I was assigned was the best way to protect your family and serve the church. The best way, to me, for you to serve the church is to protect your family. And I like to introduce my family, since obviously that's my topic. May give you a little bit more context. Just real fast, I'll run through them real quick. That's my wife in the middle. We have 6 kids, and as of 2 days ago, 7 grandkids. And we have, I won't go through all of them, but we have 2 older daughters and a son, biologically. And then God led us to adopt. And the very first child we adopted was Libby. She's right in the middle. She's from China. They found Libby in a shoebox outside of a police station. And we got her when she's 1. She's now 20 and is a sophomore in college. And just really, she's an angel on this earth. And then Michael Lynn on the far right, she's from Ethiopia. We got her when she's 3, and she's now 18. Her hand's typically on her hip because that's where she likes it. Her spiritual gift is bossiness. So I can't wait to get back home and see what kind of bossy thing she's going to say. And then JM is on the far left. He's from the Philippines. We got him when he's 12. And he's now 22. So we have 6 kids from 4 different countries. My wife was always a little, when we first got them all, she's like, "What do you think people say when we walk into a restaurant? I mean, what do you think they say?" And I was like, I know what they say in the South when I go around and show the picture. They're like, "Bless your heart," And I know what that means. That means better you than me. That's what that means. But I say, I'm just very competitive. And by that I mean we have 6 kids from 4 different countries. When we watch the Olympics, we win. All right? We do. But I love to tell a story. I tell it all the time because it flows into really the need for church planning. Is when I picked up JM in Manila, they told us be very careful with him because he's not used to some of the same luxuries that you have in the States. And I went, like, luxuries? You must have us confused. What do you mean? And he said, no, hot water. They didn't have hot water in his orphanage. They had it in Manila, but not in his orphanage. And so they basically took sink baths. They found JM wandering the streets when he was 5. And so he was in the orphanage from 5 to 12. So I said, just be careful when he go back to the hotel, help him understand hot water. So we did that. We went back. I let him jump on the bed a little bit. You can imagine being in an orphanage for 7 years, you're 12, and your first night in a hotel. I mean, this is incredible for him. And it came time for bath time. I said, JM, come here, buddy. I want to show you something. We go into the bathroom, and I say, here, let me have your hand. And I turn the water on lukewarm. And I put his hand underneath the water, and then I just gradually, I said, now watch this. And I gradually turned the water warmer and warmer and warmer until he began to feel hot water for the very first time. I'll never forget the look in those big brown Filipino eyes as he felt that hot water. And he said, "Dad, it's wonderful." I said, "It is wonderful. You're going to love it. Now, I'm going to go in there, you take off your clothes and hop in the shower." And he's like, "Shower? What's a shower?" And I'd explain a shower to him. It's those things you don't think about when you adopt. And it's like the first time we went out to eat, I ordered him chicken fingers. He's like, "No, not chicken fingers." And so I had to explain that they're not chicken fingers. That's just why they call them. He's like, "What do they call them, Dad?" I'm like, "I don't know. Just dip them in barbecue sauce. It'll be fun." You can only imagine the first night we had buffalo wings. That was a long discussion. All right. But the craziest thing is he went in, took that shower, and 20 minutes later he came out smelling really good, but all shriveled up because he loved hot. And 10 years later when he comes home, he still enjoys, appreciates it. Why? Because he remembers what it's like not to have it. My point is, often we're very spoiled. Typically, and especially when it comes to missions, we're spoiled because we think sometimes it's like it is here everywhere. And we know that. We watch the videos and we think of other countries and other states. We know that, but it really isn't like it is here everywhere else. And that's why I just want to say thank you for how your churches sacrificially give to the cooperative program and how you sacrificially give to the Annie Armstrong Easter offering. We're incredibly indebted to the state of Alabama. You give almost 8 to 10% of the Annie Armstrong offering every year. And I want you to know that every dime of that goes to the field, and it's making a difference. I want to show you just two real quick slides, and then I want to get to Colossians chapter 3, all right? In 2010, this is what LA looked like if you were to chart out the church plants in LA. Those red dots represent church plants in LA in 2010. This is what the chart looks like because of your faithful giving in 2020. Isn't that incredible? You look in DC. In DC, here's what it looked like in 2010, and this is what it looks like in 2020. My point is this. We're planting churches that plant churches that plant churches. And the exciting part of that flywheel is the more churches we plant that plant churches, I can't wait to see what that map looks like in 2030. Because our problem is, as Southern Baptists, I know you think we've got several issues, all right? One is that the majority of Southern Baptists live in the South. 80 to 85% of Southern Baptists live in the South. They live in the SEC and the ACC. It's the other conferences that are going to hell, and we've got to reach them, all right? So, I'm serious. The majority of our Southern Baptists are in the South. That's why we want to plant churches in the Northeast, the Midwest, West, and Canada, okay? All right, I wanted to share out of Colossians 3. When Blake shared with me the topic, and I mean, what an incredible sermon by Dr. Gardner. It was amazing. What I want you to look at this is not as much a sermon. It's like sometimes in college, you would take a class and then we'd follow it up with a lab, okay? And the lab is where you kind of walk through actually how to apply that. He did an incredible job with Colossians, with that passage. And what I like to do is just walk through, not as in a sermon. I really just want to share my heart because I'm incredibly burdened by this topic. I see pastors fall every week. I see churches be incredibly mean to pastors every week. It breaks my heart for the where we are and how we treat one another. And I just believe God has called us to be very, very intentional. God did not call us to be a pinball. And maybe some of you are old enough to remember pinball machines. You pull it and the ball goes in there and it just goes wherever the little flappers tell it to go. And so often I feel like pastors find themselves just trying to please this family. And they know it's over here, this family. It's always some type of drama in the church. And so often we make decisions based on noise. We decide what to do just because of, okay, who will this least offend? And what is it strategically, or we would say politically, how are we going to navigate that? I don't know about you, but you know what I found? My very first church, they voted me in 7-0. I had a mean old woman in my first church. Her name was Miss Williams. Now, she's dead now. I have no idea where she's at. But out of 7, we had 1, Miss Williams. My second church I went to in Hartsville, Tennessee, we ran about 80. Miss Williams was there. She followed me. First church was in Texas. I went to Hartsville, Tennessee. She followed me in the sense that she was there, but she just changed her name to Novella. Miss Novella. I still remember Miss Novella and how mean she was to my wife, how mean she was. She's just mean. I remember one particular Sunday when we had a guest preacher. I thought, my word, she's bound to be happy about that, you know? And she came up, and I could tell she was ready for bear. And right at the end, as I was just, shaking hands as everybody was leaving, and said, "Great service today, Miss." I almost said her last name, Miss Novella. And she said, "Yes, but the flags are on the wrong side of the platform." And I just want to say, well, just go change them. I had to learn some things in seminary, not to say everything you think. My point is, sometimes we lead based on the loudest noises. I recently read a book on excellence wins by a guy named Schultz. Brother Schultz founded the Ritz-Carlton. What he says in the first chapter of that book is, he said, even in the Ritz-Carlton, we cannot please 2% of the people. We train our people to please everybody. That's our goal, is to please everyone. But we know going in that 2% we're not going to please. Man, I wish I'd have read that years ago. Because you think about it in your church, there's just some people, they're not pleasable. They're just not pleasable. And you think about the Southern Baptist Convention. Some people, just not pleasable. 16 million, 47,000 churches. I did the numbers. 47,000 churches, 2% of 47,000 churches is 940 churches, potentially, would be a 2% jerk factor. See, I'm much more optimistic about our convention than many, because I don't think we have 940 jerks. I don't. I got a list. I'm up to 53, all right? You do the numbers. That's 1/2 of 1%. They just happen to be loud. You know, I just think it's time that we pastor and we lead with our heart, not with our thumbs. And so often, we try to think of how we can navigate things. I just want to encourage you, my word, if you lose your family, you do lose. One day you're going to finish. You know what's going to happen? They're going to throw your reception if you're lucky. They're going to repaint that office and they're going to move somebody else in it. And they're going to tell him all the things that you didn't do so well and how he could be better in the long run. I just want to encourage you real quick, and I get right to it. In Colossians 3, and the reason I said I want to make it a lab is I really read this in my quiet time several months ago, and I just cannot get off of this chapter because I'm so burdened by the meanness of a small, loud few, often in a church. And I just want to remind us of 3 things. Best way to protect your family and serve the church is to focus. You must be faithful and focused to the finish. Let's just read Colossians 3, 1 through 4, and then we'll talk about it. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Now, how this convicted me in my own personal quiet time is when it says, set your mind on the things that are above. We've all know that. We've preached it. You set your mind. You have to deliberately set your mind. It's one thing to say it and another thing to do it. I went to my calendar and looked and said, if I'm really setting my mind, does my calendar reflect that verse? Does my giving reflect that verse? Does my serving reflect that verse? Time. If you don't learn to handle your time and the whole point of focus is to be intentional. If you're not intentional with how you handle your time, others will be. If you don't set your calendar, your church will be glad to set it for you. If you don't protect your family time, there have been plenty of people that will take that over. And in the end of it, and when all's said and done, and we're to serve the Lord, you know that. But who's going to be there at the very end? It's going to be your family. And it grieves me sometimes how well-intentioned we're well-intentioned. I had a pastor brag on the fact that he missed his daughter's high school graduation to do a funeral. And that is the most foolish, that's really one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my entire life. And shame on you when you do that. Remember one thing, my daughter was 12. She's now just had her 4th child 2 days ago. But I remember when she was 12, I preached a sermon on time. And I calculated at that particular time, there were 309 Saturdays left until she graduated high school. I said, I got 309 Saturdays. I want to be strategic with those. I look now, and my word, she's been graduated for at least 15 years. Time is so precious. God gives us a limited amount of time, and we're responsible to be very proactive. If you're not proactive, others will be. I'm reminded of Acts chapter 20. Remember Paul when he was leaving the church, the elders at Ephesus? In chapter 20, verse 24, he says, "But I do not account my life of any value nor as precious to myself, if only I may finish the course and the ministry that I received from the Lord Jesus, to testify to the gospel of God's grace." Man, I love that verse because he says, "I consider my life worth nothing to me, but that I might complete the task." And we don't have to be about the task of pleasing those around us, but pleasing the Lord and protecting our families a part of that. To focus. The second thing I want you to look at just real quickly is to eliminate. Not only are we to focus, you to be very intentional with your time, and I beg you as a lab, you set your calendar and block time for your spouse, block date nights, and block time with your kids, and block time with your grandkids. And if you don't do that, no one else will. Second is to eliminate. I want you to look in verse 5 through 9, and then we'll talk about a few specific things. It says, "Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desiring, covetousness, which is idolatry." The next verse, if you would. Oh, I'm sorry. What I wanted to do is take those verses, when it says put those things to death, eliminate those things, get rid of or jettison those things. How do you practically do that? In my church I pastored years and years ago, I set up a code of conduct because I had four best friends in seminary, and there's only one of those four still in ministry. And this conduct code, if you will, came from several different guys. So it's not something original. I got 3 or 4 different guys' code of conducts. I merged them and come up with this one that our staff and now our NAM missionaries go by. And they have to sign off on this every year. I will conduct myself in a way that reflects positively on Christ and the North American Mission Board. And what I basically say to them then, look, when in doubt, leave it out. If you have to ask yourself, should I? Probably don't. Okay? When in doubt, leave it out. I got that from my tennis coach in high school who is not a believer, and he simply said, when in doubt, call it out. But that's exactly the translation. The second thing is, he wasn't a believer. I didn't follow his advice. But he says, I will be a tithing member of record in good standing in my church. Again, I feel like it's a stewardship issue. And as a pastor, we need to make that same commitment. And to me, if you are not doing that, we're stealing from the Lord, and we're to be a good, and we expect every missionary to do that, and I know you follow that example in your church. I will abstain from the consumption of any alcohol beverage or illegal drugs. We had to add that because Colorado legalized some drugs there. So look at number 4. Go ahead, keep going. I will not view pornography. Keep going. I want to move this pretty fast. I will maintain financial integrity. I will not show affection that could be questioned. We go down through and have them check each one of these. I will be careful in answering cards, letters, and email notes from the opposite sex. I want to stop there for a second. So I had a pastor, one of our ministers at Highview in Louisville, question me. He says, what do you mean by show affection that could be questioned? I said, well, look, when you hug a woman who's not your wife and her feet leave the ground, that's to be questioned. And because that's exactly what he did. When people start looking for these ins and outs of how to show affection, and what I found is how they answer things, especially in the day of text and email, and we ask that anytime we're emailing someone, other than our personal assistant, that you copy someone else on it, because the way that it could be interpreted. Hey, praying for you today, or thinking of you today, or those little things that may not seem like a big deal to you may seem to someone else. And my point is this: so often we just get carried. We don't think. We just don't think, and then sometimes we're tired and we're worn out, and the fact that we're being foolish and we're tired and all works together. I've not talked to one pastor who's gone through an affair who intended to do it at the start. It's all about being intentional, and we have to eliminate certain things. I have a picture of a baseball field. I tried to find one of Braves Field, but couldn't do it. It's interesting if you look at baseball fields, every baseball field, official baseball field, has something toward the fence there, and it's called a warning track. The purpose of that is when you're going out for a fly ball, when your feet hit that warning track, you know that you need to slow down or you're going to hit the wall and you're going to cause some damage, long-term damage perhaps. And that's why it's there. It's put there to protect you. What I found in ministry, if you're really going to protect your family, you're going to draw some boundaries. But what I found is guys draw their boundaries too close to the line. They get right to where it's wrong. They draw the boundary there, and there's no warning track at all. And to give a sense of a buffer there. That's why people have often, even some of our planners and pastors will look at our list and say, my word, you guys are being legalistic. And you're doggone right we are. We're drawing a very clear line way over from where it actually needs to be. Why push it so much to the very end and feel like, one of our guidelines is you're not to go out to eat with someone of the opposite sex who's not your wife alone. There's just no need to do that. You always take someone else with you. I think, there we go. If married other than a spouse or another family member, I will not be at a residence alone, have a meal alone, or in a car alone with the opposite sex. That's very important, and I would beg you guys, no matter how young or how old you are, if you would to commit to do that as a lab of eliminating certain things. And here's the reason. The North American Mission Board spent a lot of money on a study. We found if you are never alone with someone of the opposite sex who's not your wife, there's a high probability you will not have an affair. We spent nothing on it because it's just common sense. But you know and I know, literally every week of the year, multiple people fall. And if they just fall, it just follows some simple guidelines of what to add to their life and what to eliminate. You can eliminate some things. You just got to have some practical guidelines and say that you will not do this. And at our church, we expected our deacons to do this and saying, look, there has to be some separation. When I went to Highview Baptist Church, I followed a pastor who had been having an affair for 6 years. He had an affair with a woman who was having an affair at the same time with a music minister. And so when I was interviewed with the search committee, they said, you have any questions about that particular incident? I said, well, haven't you? I got some questions about that. It's not something you hear every day. My word. And they said, what's your first question? I said, I want to see your picture, I just want to be able to identify that woman. I'm going to stay. What have you guys done at all? This is, and what was so sad about this is they were very conscientious about wanting to answer all the details. That meeting went to 12 to 12:30 in the morning. You know how search meetings can go. At 12:30 in the morning, the chairman of deacons, they were all going to leave. Chairman of deacons told another lady, he said, hey, look, it's late. I'll be glad to drive you home. I went, oh my gosh, it's just 12:30 in the morning. And so I didn't say anything at the time, but the next day when we came back together, I was like, there's the problem. You're driving through downtown Louisville with a woman who's not your wife, and you didn't think twice about it. And again, we're just not using good sense. I beg you, put some boundaries. If they're not this legalistic list, I'll be glad to share it with you. Come up with your own and make a commitment, and then find people that you'll actually be accountable to in that list. So some things to eliminate. We have to focus, be intentional. We have to eliminate some things, and then we have to coordinate. What I mean by coordinate is there are a lot of things go into this. And we'll just read through verse 10 through 14, and let me explain what I mean by that. And have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. Here there is not Greek nor Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and in all. Put on then. Now, some things we have to coordinate. There's some things you're absolutely to put on, and you have to continually put them on. They're not just there, and they're always going to be there. You have to keep putting them on. Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, put on compassionate hearts, Keep putting on kindness. You put on humility, put on meekness and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other. As the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all things, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. Boy, when I read that, I thought so many times about people in my church, and even people now. Not knowing their intention, but you can tell by the way they conduct their life. They just round down. I remember one man, Mr. Luther, I went to see him in the hospital because everybody else was scared to do it. And went in, he said, "Just what I thought." I was like, "What's that, Mr. Luther?" And he said, "You didn't come visit me until you knew I was in here." I didn't say I always pastored the smartest people in the world, but you got me there. But we all have people in our church that round down. We all have people in our life that round down. It's like just built-in Eeyores. I met a guy for the first year just shook his head the whole time. I could go into story after story, and all of you could share stories. My point is this. It's not helpful just to sit in self-pity, to feel sorry for yourself, and to talk about how ill-treated you are. To me, we're all called. You're called for a purpose. How about you? But when I feel called to do what I do, I'd rather pastor than do what I do. But we're called to do what we do. We focus on that goal. And as Paul said, I consider my life worth nothing to me, but that I might complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me, the task of testifying to the gospel of God's grace. But I just want to encourage you, whatever you do, stay faithful and focused. The Apostle Paul knew about that. He wrote Colossians. If you read the book of Acts, it was time and time again. He would 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, and sometimes 3 steps forward and 5 steps back. But he stayed focused on the message of repentance. You see, Jesus does still save. Culture has changed, but the message that we have has not. And people still need the Lord. It is difficult and challenges come, but Jesus and the gospel makes a difference. What I love about Acts, you get all the way down to Acts 18, Paul went through difficulty, so much so that he was at his darkest point, most commentators would say, in Acts 18. They say that because that's when Jesus came to him in a dream or a vision. It says in Acts 18, verse 9 and 10. And I read these verses and really quote them every week. And look what it says when the Lord encouraged Paul. And the Lord said to Paul one night in a vision, "Do not be afraid, but go on speaking and do not be silent. For I am with you, and no one will attack you to harm you, for I have many in this city who are my people." I love that because he said to Paul, he's basically saying, stop being afraid, the way he uses it in the Greek. Stop being afraid. You're afraid? Stop being afraid. Don't be afraid, Paul. Stop it. Stop being afraid. Do not be afraid. And then the second thing he says is, keep on speaking. Do not become silent. What's he saying? Do not quit. You keep on speaking, but it's hard. You keep on speaking. You don't understand some of the people I have to deal with. You keep on speaking and do not be silent. Stop being afraid and you do not quit. You stop being afraid and you do not quit. Stop being afraid and do not quit. It would just be a spiritual pep rally if we just left us there. But then what does he say? Those next words are so important. Would you read them with me? Where it says, "For I am..." Let's do it again. You ready? It's real simple. Here we go. For For I am with you. Because I'm with you, you don't have to be afraid. Because I'm with you, you don't have to ever quit. Because I'm with you. I've got your back. I love to tell a story. I'm a Kentucky fan. I'll go ahead and admit it. I know you people here like football. You're very fond of football. In Kentucky, it's an appetizer, all right? We're waiting to basketball season. And in football, you know, I tell this all the time. In Kentucky, literally, when there's a tornado in Kentucky, they tell everybody to go to the football field because there's very few touchdowns there, all right? It's the safest place to be. I know, dad joke, right? I know, it's bad. But when I got married, we got married December 28th, 1985. Married in a little town, Findlay, Tennessee, the love of my life. Everything was going great. Then we had our first big marital challenge. It was on March 17th, 1986. It's something still celebrated today called March Madness. Being a Kentucky fan, I get a little focused during March Madness and was watching the ball game, and we'd just been married 3 months, and she wanted to talk. And I simply said, can we wait till after the game? To which she said, is the game more important than me? Now, I hadn't been married long enough to know to lie at this point. I'm just teasing, all right? Don't be so sensitive, and don't tweet that, please. My point is, it was not a healthy thing in our marriage, and so I finally said, she said, you know, you're too competitive. You yell at the TV. You know, you got anger issues. You yell at the referees. I went, that's not anger. I'm just trying to encourage them to do better next time. You know, I've just tried to, we all sometimes get involved. Well, what I learned to do, just real fast, I started recording the games. Back then was tape it, record the games, and then I watch them later. I still do that. I don't watch a Kentucky game live. I know supposedly we got beat last week by Duke. I didn't see it, won't watch it, deleted it already, all right? So I record every game. I find out the score, and if we win, I watch it. And then you think he needs counseling. Perhaps, but I'm telling you, it works. Now, what I meant is, I started watching the games. Now, she watches games with me now. It's so simple. I'll watch a game all the time. There's a game we played in the tournament a couple years ago, Michigan, where we were behind by 10 points. 10 points, and the announcers were negative. Just Kentucky's going down. This is, the big year coming down. And all this negativity. Was I nervous at all at half? Not at all. Because I knew we won. Sure makes a big difference on how you take the negativity when you know you win in the end. 10 minutes to go in the second half, we're down by 8. Ooh. 5 minutes to go, we're still behind. 1 minute to go, we're down 2 points, and they have the ball with 59 seconds to go. Am I nervous? No. I'm petting my dog. I'm just waiting to see what happens next because I know we win in the end. And I know what happens now because I've watched it so many times. At the 40-second mark, we steal the ball. We come down to our side of the court. We pass the ball around. We can get a shot off. I bet we do. And then they throw it over to Aaron Harrison with about 3 seconds to go. 3, 2, 1. Does it go in? It does. Every time. And I love watching that game. And then my whole point for a silly story is simply this. It changes everything when you know you win in the end. We all have to deal with people that we don't prefer to deal with. I beg you, don't be afraid. There's no need to be afraid. And do not quit, for he is with us. And he goes on to tell Paul, not only am I with you, there are many people in this city that you know not of, he says in the King James. You know what that means? Of course you do. He's saying, Paul, I'm going to use you to do things you have no idea about. I got so many great things ahead you know not of. I do. You don't. Trust me. Don't be afraid. Don't quit. I got this. He had Paul, and he's got you. I pray that you serve your church by protecting your family. Father, I pray for every pastor in here. Lord, I pray that you not only encourage them, but Lord, just put a hedge of protection around them, that they might use wisdom in drawing the lines and protect themselves by saying no to certain things, and Lord, protect themselves by just putting a buffer in their life. And Lord, I thank you for their passion for you. But Lord, may they not lose focus of the importance of finishing and staying faithful and focused to the finish. I pray that, Lord, so many in here have started well, they've persevered. But Lord, my prayer for every one of us is that we all finish well. Thank you for how you love us. You don't need us, but you use us anyway. Thank you for loving us, and Lord, for always being there. In Jesus' name, amen.